Okay, so I'm long overdue in making one of these. Recently, Microsoft sort of gave me an ultimatum. I had to go to Windows 10 or I had to risk losing all kinds of updates and lose a lot of security enhancements. So I had to reluctantly go through the process of doing all of that. And even though the switch over to Windows 10 went pretty smooth, the camera software just went haywire. I mean, everything went wrong with it. And as of this morning, I just uninstalled it and reinstalled it all over again. And I think, with my fingers crossed, that it's working right now. But I'll know more when I upload this thing and see if the microphone quality is any good or not. But anyway, gonna jump right into this article that I stumbled across, believe it or not, by accident. I think I saw it in a thread online or something like that, but it's one of these typical articles where, they're telling us how that we're just awful people if we bash AA because it could save someone's life. I do love it how they're always using that line, saving someone's life. But anyway, I'll get right into it right now, and I'll post a link of it in the bottom of the video description. If this video camera works and if this upload goes smoothly, it remains to be seen. So it says, when you're done bashing Alcoholics Anonymous, it may be the thing that saves your life. Oh yeah, how many times have we heard that before? It may be the thing that kills you also. Maybe the thing that becomes detrimental to your recovery. It may be the place where you get 13th stepped or you get bullied around by old timers. But let's not bring up any of that because it might save our lives. They never do mention all the people it kills. Anyway, the writer starts out with, I can no longer stay silent. I'm fed up with people who bash the life-saving program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I'm fed up with the fact that the legal system sends people there. I'm fed up with the fact that Hollywood promotes it in almost every other type of series. I mean, there's certain things on Netflix I can't even watch because it's so pro-AA. I'm a little bit tired of the way that it's rammed down the public's throat that it's the only safe alternative there is out there. And I'm sick of the $1 million a year treatment cartel, $1 billion a year treatment cartel, I meant to say. So I guess we're on an even place here. Is it perfect, the author writes? No. Does it have pros and cons? Yes, but so does breathing. Breathing has pros and cons. When you have a fractured rib, they write, it hurts, but hey, we have to keep breathing anyway. That's really, really a poor comparison. I mean, to be perfectly honest, if a fractured rib hurts and you've got to breathe, what does that have to do with if you got to quit drinking, you must go to AA? Are you presenting this false dichotomy that AA is unpleasant, but just deal with it because that's where you got to go if you're going to stop drinking, because just deal with it. There's pros and cons to it. It's funny. I'll see these people in these articles like this. They'll say something like there's pros and cons to it. They never do talk about the cons to AA. They only talk about how it can save your life and you'll die if you don't do it. They can only talk about how it's the only safe way to quit drinking. They can always push all these absolutes on you, but they never do talk about the cons. They just say it kind of in a minimization type way. They just push it to the side. Yeah, there's cons, but so what? Fuck you. You got to come here and you got to surrender your will and your life and everything else to us. Otherwise, you're just dead. Okay, the survival of, oh no, I almost skipped a sentence. In that same spirit, I and millions of others forge on in Alcoholics Anonymous because it works when nothing else did. Yeah, millions of people. Here we go again with that same old tired, worn-out argument that it saved millions and millions of people. It's funny, they always throw out this millions of people thing. They don't talk about the studies that were done by even pro-AA people. I can't say the guy's name right off the top of my head this morning. The one who set out to prove that AA worked and came up with disastrous... George Valiant. That was who I was trying to say. I was having one of those moments where my brain just didn't want to fire on all the synapses. He was a pro-AA dude that set out to prove that AA worked, and he came back with disastrous results. But of course, being a pro-AA apologist like he was, he had to come around and say, well, it still leads people to God. So it doesn't matter if millions of people die, and it doesn't matter if the binge drinking gets worse, and it doesn't matter that the steps have been proven not to have any effect whatsoever on people's outcome of quitting drinking. It leads people to God. So let's just make excuses for all the failures, and let's just say it's a good thing overall because it's helped these millions of people. It's funny, the AA rooms that I've been through, and I was in AA for over a decade, and all I saw was a revolving door of people being forced in by the courts. And I saw a lot of people kill themselves, and I saw a lot of relapsing, myself included, for a number of years. But I didn't see, just hundreds of thousands of people all come in and pick up a white chip and suddenly have a year and have 2 years and 3 years. I mean, I never saw any really major long-term successes from my own anecdotal evidence in my own experiences. You would think if it's saving all these millions and millions of people, that meetings everywhere all over the country and all over the world would just be overcrowded with old timers, right? Every AA meeting wouldn't just be full of these, little ruling hierarchies of old timers and a revolving door of people coming in and out, in and out. I mean, kind of the evidence is in your own eyes that it doesn't save millions of people, but let's just presume that I'm going to hear you talk about how it saved your life and millions of others. It still doesn't dismiss the fact that it's harmed millions of lives and millions of others. I mean, if you're going to claim that the program saves millions of people, you also got to claim the credit for the fact that the program is detrimental to a lot of people. But of course, you're not going to do that. You're just going to say the people who don't make it, or the people who didn't want to get sober, or the people who just didn't want to do the program anyway. I mean, what does it say in there how it works? Those who recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves over to this simple program. You notice it doesn't say those who don't recover are people that need help in other areas of their life that we can't help them with, and we need to send them over to doctors and psychiatrists or whoever the fuck else we can refer them to. And yeah, they're going to say that that wasn't a big deal in the 1930s. That's true, but you still make an absolute statement by saying that those who don't recover are people who just can't or won't do it. You're conveniently shifting the blame with anybody who fails as saying it's their fault and not the fault of the program. So, I mean, that's kind of a mute argument, but let's continue with this article and see where we're going. The survival of Alcoholics Anonymous is crucial. Oh, it is crucial? Let me ask you this. Is Alcoholics Anonymous evolving with the modern world, with the year 2020 that we're living in now? Is that crucial to you? Or is just clinging to a cult religion from the 1930s that hasn't updated itself, hasn't joined the modern world, is still using concepts that have been proven to be detrimental to people's mental health? Is that not important to you? I think it's funny how quick people will make excuses for things about, well, in the 1930s, they didn't know about that kind of thing. Yeah, but you still want to use a program from the 1930s that's completely and totally out of date. And you say the survival of it is crucial. Crucial to who? Crucial to you? And what do you mean by the survival of it? I don't think AA is in any danger of going anywhere at the present time because, let's see, the courts force people there, psychiatrists force people there, medical institutions force people there. I've known people that have been sent there because their fucking lawyers told them they wouldn't represent them in divorce cases unless they went to AA. And the billions and billions of dollars a year treatment industry and halfway house industry and all the other things, they're sending millions of people there, to use your own word about millions of people. So it's not really in any danger of going anywhere. When you say the survival of AA is crucial, what you're really saying is everybody who has a problem with it or anybody who speaks out against it ought to be quiet. That you don't want other people talking bad about it. You just can't stand it, is what you just said in the opening of this article in your own words. I think that's funny, by the way. I can't stand it when somebody talks bad about my program. I can't stand it when I see people sitting in meetings and saying some have to die so that others can live. I can't stand it when I see people dismiss someone who blows their brains out because they couldn't get the program, saying, well, it's by the grace of God. I can't stand that either. So I guess we can call this even, right? Just because you can't stand something doesn't mean you can destroy what you can't stand. Okay. I continue to watch people, the author writes, try other methods, and when all else fails, they end up in AA. I watched my mother suffer for 25 years. She tried a slew of therapist gurus and renowned psychiatrists, all to no avail. She did get sober in AA and found an unimaginable life that she could never attain in any other way. They're always talking about a life beyond your wildest dreams, and I'm a little bit skeptical when you talk about you knew all these people that tried everything else. I used to hear so many old-timers in the meetings. They would always sit around and they would say something like, I tried everything. I tried religion. I tried different religions. I was a Buddhist, and then I was a Muslim, and then I was a Southern Baptist. And I'm like, well, first of all, you couldn't have actually in-depth studied any religion, in any tiny period of time and tried all these different religions like you're claiming, and then I'll hear them say, I tried psychiatrist, I tried this and I tried that, and then I got here and it worked. Well, there is some food for thought there that maybe you didn't think about, because I tried AA and it didn't do me any good at all. Maybe it has nothing to do with finding AA that you got, that you finally quit drinking. Maybe by the time you got to AA, you were so tired of drinking that you quit drinking on your own anyway. Logically speaking, illogically speaking, I meant to say, let's just say you're tired of drinking and you go see a shrink one time and you say, okay, shrink didn't really help me. I fucking need a drink after talking to him. And then you go, to this new age, whatever it is thing you try and it doesn't work. And then, one morning you wake up and you say, God, I'm just so sick of drinking. I'm just so sick of trying to figure out ways to not get drunk. And let's say you just happen to accidentally stumble into a Catholic church on that very morning, and you hear some sermon that kind of moves you, and you say, that this is just it. I'm just not going to drink anymore. And you would somehow appropriate, well, it was that sermon. It was God speaking to me. It was the Catholic Church talking to me that got me sober. No. What really happened is you got so tired of living the way you were living and so tired of being hopelessly addicted that you just finally did something about it. And then you came to AA and you decided to let AA get all the credit for what you already wanted to do. But I'm a little bit skeptical. I've seen all these people try it and they all end up in AA. How many people are we talking about? I mean, that personally that honestly tried other things before they gave up and went to AA. I'm not talking about people that went to AA, left AA, fiddled around with drinking here and there and relapsing here and there and trying a few half-ass other methods and then just came back to AA because they decided not to give anything else another fair shot. Okay, I'm talking about people that for a fact before they ever got to AA, tried everything that they could within their power to quit drinking, and then it just didn't work until they came to AA, and then all of a sudden they were magically struck sober. I mean, let's analyze what you're saying here a little bit more than just this blanket assertion, I've seen people try it all and it didn't work, and they came here. Let's keep going. And what is this life beyond their wildest dreams she's talking about? Sitting in meetings all the time, talking about alcohol all the time, talking about how worthless you are, that you found out what you were like in your 4-step inventory, and now you got to continue to take inventory for the rest of your life, promptly admit when you're wrong, which nobody ever does, by the way. It seems like the so-called spiritual gurus are some of the most inconsiderate, selfish, and cruel people I ever encountered. So I'm not sure what they're getting out of these spiritual experiences. Anyway, it was only natural that when I decided to stop drinking, I went the same route that proved successful for my mother. Well, it's only natural because you were around AA and you just knew that was the way to go. Since that fateful day in 1989, I've watched scores of people revolve through the doors of AA. Some never return, others who return after a few years or a few months trying to figure it out. Some died trying, others stayed dry but remained miserable, and others came back to AA because they were sick of failing, and they were now humbled enough to try a solution that seemed to work for so many. Well, you kind of just made my case for me. I mean, you started out by saying you can't stand for people to talk bad about AA. You started out by saying you don't like people to, that it's pretty much the only solution that works, right? That you've seen people try all these other solutions and the only thing that happens is they end up in AA. Now you go on to say that you've seen people commit suicide. You've seen people remain dry but miserable. Oh yeah, the old dry drunk myth. And then you go to say some people even die trying to get it. And then you go on to say there's a few who get humble enough to do it. Now this is kind of an interesting bit of logic you got here. You're saying that all the people you saw revolve in and out and die, they just didn't want to quit drinking bad enough. It could have no problem. It could have nothing to do with the program. That all the people who committed suicide as a result of this thing, it has nothing to do with the program. That all the people you saw revolve in and out and even dry up and stay miserable, it had nothing to do with the program. But just the few people here and there that actually say it worked for them, that's the proof that AA is such a great thing. I mean, I fail to kind of understand how you can have an organization that gets all the credit just for the success cases, but refuses to look at anything in the cases that are not successful. For example, if a scientist is working on a cure for an illness, and he develops some kind of vaccine in its earliest stages, and it only works on a couple, let's say, of test subjects, and then the other test subjects die. Okay, it would be horribly bad science for the scientist to say, well, I mean, 2 patients survived, 20 died, but I mean, obviously the 2 patients wanted to get well. It's a really faulty way of looking at things, but let's just keep going and see what's going to happen next. As a result of the 12 steps, other recovery programs have sprung up, such as Celebrate Recovery and Smart Recovery. Both programs have found solid footing in the recovery world because they also give people a roadmap through the steps to deal with personality quirks, traumas, and emotional baggage that sent many of us to the bottle in the first place. You just said you got tired of people trying other methods that didn't work. And now you're saying other recovery programs have developed. And now you're claiming, rather erroneously, that these other recovery programs are somehow correlated with AA, that they have a solid footing in recovery. In other words, what you're trying to do is grab the success of the other programs and say, well, it's because they have a solid footing in AA-style recovery that they're successful, which is blatantly false. Now, Celebrate Recovery, I know what that is. That's just AA with Christianity, which in my opinion is just it being more honest about what it is. AA itself holds on to this vague, phony, ill-defined definition of a higher power. It's just a higher power that wants you to stay sober, work steps, 13-step newcomers, live in meetings, drink bad coffee, and laugh at people who commit suicide because they just didn't get the program. They weren't honest. I mean, that's the AA vague definition. When you get to Celebrate Recovery, they just use the Bible and the Big Book to back up everything. But Smart Recovery, this reminds me of these people I've seen online that try to say cognitive behavioral therapy and AA are the same thing. And I mean, when you say that, that's just blatantly false. There's no similarity to faith healing and cognitive behavioral therapy whatsoever. If you look at one of Albert Ellis's books and you look at the Big Book, you can see a complete total difference. I mean, this is just plain dishonest. That's what this is. Some of the arguments against AA just aren't true. Okay, I just like it. They're not true because you said so, right? There are no absolutes. I've been sober for 30 years in the rooms of AA, and not once has anyone told me what religion I had to be. I bet they told you that God wants you to do a 4-step. I bet they told you that God wants you to confess your sins, and he wants you to make amends, and he wants you to take the first step. And how come the Big Book talks about he and him versus it or versus she, for example? How come the higher powers are clearly cut out for you? How come it starts out with this vague spirit of the universe kind of crap talk, and then you read We Agnostics, and it's just one big, gigantic damning indictment of everybody who doesn't accept the AA program because they're all closed-minded and they're all narrow-minded because they don't believe in Bill Wilson's cult religion. But there's no absolutes in AA, right? There's no absolutes like those who don't conform to our way of life sign their own death warrant. That comes from Bill W. himself. There's no absolutes like if you don't recover, it's because you cannot or will not completely give yourself to this simple program. There's no absolutes like if we skip this vital step, we will never overcome drinking. There's no absolutes like we have to stop doubting the power of God when we see it working in others. There's no absolutes like one poor chap committed suicide because he just could not or would not see our way of life. Yeah, there's no absolutes there at all, right? And all those things in the Big Book that say must, they're not real anyway. Like, we must be rid of selfishness or it will kill us. God makes that possible. That's not an absolute statement, right? Dr. Bob saying if you're an atheist or an agnostic, I feel sorry for you. What he really means is if you don't accept AA's version of religion, he feels sorry for you. Because anybody who doesn't blindly swallow Bill Wilson's dogma is accused of being closed-minded. It is accused of being bigoted. Or what about the 12 and 12 that pretty much says that atheists are savage people, or that there are those who just will not believe in God? Or what about the part in the 12 and 12 where it says our instincts have far exceeded their intended purposes? How the fuck does AA know what intended purposes are with instincts? So don't give me that crap. I could go on all day about the absolutes in AA. I do believe in God, but I've met over the years many who are atheists, and they too have found long-term recovery in AA. Well, you know, that the atheist AA people I've always thought of as just oxymoronic, to be honest with you. What they've done is they'll say things like spiritual principles is what got me sober, which you can't really be. I'm not an atheist, by the way. I will add that. I'm not an atheist, but if you are an atheist, I mean, I don't see how you can say spiritual principles. I don't see how you can be in a program where every step has the word God in it. I don't see how you can be in a program with a chapter like We Agnostics that pretty much condemns everybody who's an atheist agnostic to being just the most ignorant, you know, closed-minded people there is, or even the 12 and 12 that talks about them as savages. But, you know, that's a good little thing that you like to throw out here and there. Oh, I know some atheists who even got sober in AA. Well, pretty much everybody in AA is pretty much non-religious, in my opinion. I mean, there's no code of conduct outside of blabbering about spiritual principles. I mean, old-timers prey on newcomers. Drugs are sold in meetings. I mean, there's nobody who actually adheres to any of the shit they're preaching. So I would say there's nobody in AA who believes in much of anything other than themselves and their own grandiosity. I didn't go to Alcoholics Anonymous to meet a man. Well, good for you. I went to save my own life, and for the most part, 99% of the time, the men have been respectful. 99% of the time. Wait a minute. So you're saying that every woman who gets 13-stepped, you're saying every woman who's ever been preyed on went to AA to meet a man. It's a clever little sly, underhanded tactic you just pulled there. What you're saying is that the people who go to AA and get raped or get, exploited, you're just saying they went there to meet a man. They didn't go there to save their life. That's an incredibly fucking arrogant assertion to make. Of course you're going to get guys who are predators, and sometimes women prey on the new person because they are too there for all the wrong reasons. Yeah, but you're not going to do anything about it, right? Because the survival of AA is crucial. You know, let me paint an example here. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I've said that before around here in videos. I don't believe in the Catholic Church any longer. I don't believe that way. I never saw any priests molest little kids when I was growing up in the Catholic Church. Most of the priests I knew were either drunk or they were mentally ill dudes. I mean, why else would you want to become a priest anyway? But they were either mentally ill or they were drunk. I never saw or heard anything about sexual abuse of little kids growing up in the Catholic Church. This was, the 1980s and 90s, and the story didn't start breaking until the 90s about what went on in the Catholic Church, right? So by the logic you're using here, and by the logic that I'm about to use, your own same faulty logic, because I never saw any little kids get preyed on, and because I never saw any sex abuse happen, it didn't happen. And if it did, it's not really a big deal. And after all, it's the victim's fault, right? I mean, it's so reprehensible to me that you're going to sit here and you're going to just casually, brush it off. Oh yeah, it happens. Some people get raped, and some people get exploited, and some people get used and abused. And yeah, there's some predators, but it's no big deal, right? There's predators everywhere. Right, you're not going to do anything to try to make your organization more safer. You're not going to amend anything in your literature to try to do anything to protect people. You're just going to brush it off. Well, hey, somebody got raped and they committed suicide, but, I didn't, and I didn't see it, so it doesn't have anything to do with the AA program. You can't blame AA for that. It's not a big deal. Besides that, it was the people who came there looking for a man, right? I mean, this is so astonishing how AA does this. This is so disgusting, too. They blame the victim. It's all the victim's fault. Well, yeah, you got raped, and yeah, your sponsor stole money from you, and yeah, your sponsor, called your family behind your back and ruined your home life and everything. But it happens. It happens everywhere. It's not the program's fault. It's your fault. I mean, it just makes me want to, oh God, it's just. One woman recently wrote an opinion piece and said something about worrying about programs that tell people to renounce power, and if we acknowledge our powerlessness, that can make us sicker. Yeah, that's true. Are you kidding me? No, we're not kidding you, but that's serious. Telling people they're powerless is highly detrimental to anybody getting well. Empowerment is what got me well. By the way, lady, I was a relapsing all the time in AA and drinking myself to death. And then when I left AA, I stopped drinking. So are you kidding me that you think this? What alcoholic has gotten sober who thinks they can still control their drinking? Question begging. Hundreds upon thousands of people have done that. But of course, AA doesn't want you to know about that. AA doesn't want you to know about moderation management. AA doesn't want you to know about all the people who have learned to moderate. AA doesn't want to tell you about those things. AA just wants to use its own members as source material and claim, well, there you go, there's the proof. Nobody is ever successful again. They all are powerless, otherwise they don't make it. It's a lie. If you can't admit you're powerless over alcohol, then you probably aren't ready to get sober, and I doubt that any method you try will work. Well, you doubt it. Okay, that's really comical here. If you're not willing to admit you're powerless, no method's going to work. So in other words, even if you come to AA and you sincerely believe you're powerless, and you sincerely do the steps like I did, and you sincerely write 4 steps and 5th steps, and you do those stupid amendments, and you do all of that other shit that you do, and it doesn't work, it's because you weren't really truly ready to admit you were powerless over alcohol. I like it how you just make this blanket assertion, okay, that you just know that everyone, everywhere, all over the planet, all over the world, that if they don't admit they're powerless and take step 1, they're not going to make it. And I mean, but you know, you do say there's other paths to sobriety, but you just said unless you take a step 1, you're not going to make it. These people contradict themselves so much, and you know, they use their own vocabulary and their own writings to paint themselves in the corners that they can't get out of. And then I'm just gonna, a godless world seems to produce people who are angry and lonely. I skipped over some things because it's crap. All you have to do is look at the suicide stats to know that something is not right. Oh my God, a program like AA that's full of suicides. And you're claiming, you know, you've gone from saying that AA helps people get sober to now claiming that there's a godless world out here, it's full of suicide, and therefore everybody needs to believe in God. So you've just contradicted yourself again. You claimed that you knew atheists who got sober in AA. Now you're saying that those who live in a godless world commit suicide. Did you think to edit any of this shit before you started writing it? Why talk negatively against a program that's helped millions of people recover? Why talk positively about a program that's destroyed millions of people? I really don't care how a person gets sober. That's a lie. You just said unless you take step 1 and admit you're powerless, you can't get sober. If whatever works for you, great. No, you don't believe whatever works for anybody else is great. You just got through saying that people can't moderate, that people will never be able to moderate, that unless they admit they're powerless, they'll never be able to get sober. Now you're going to lie and you're going to say, oh, if it works for you, great. The odds of anyone staying sober for any length of time are not all that great. Oh yeah, whatever works for you is great, but it's not going to work for you. The odds are against you. God. There are no foolproof or fail-proof solutions. Well, you just kind of hinted that there was. You just said unless people take a first step, they'll never quit. Now you're saying that there is no foolproof solutions. Which one is it here? Make up your mind. There's a huge market for people who want to hear that you can get sober and not have to work for it. I have never heard anybody out here that says you don't have to work to get sober. And of course, sober in AA terminology doesn't have anything to do with not drinking. Sober means working the steps and living in meetings and writing down everything that's bad about yourself and doing a lot of negative reinforcement. Now, it was hard as hell for me to quit drinking, and I quit it on my own. And it didn't require surrendering, and it didn't require saying I was powerless. It didn't require any of that. It required me saying I have the power to choose. I can choose to drink, and I can choose not to drink, and I choose not to drink. Anyway, I'm going on. So I'm going to just keep going here a little bit longer. I'm going to skip over this. This is just more bullshit. Oh my God, here we go. Humility is not something that alcoholics or addicts possess while in the throes of their disease. Humility and drinking has absolutely nothing to do with one another. Not one thing to do with one another. You're just making a blanket assertion with no basis in reality whatsoever. I worked in healthcare. I see the wreckage of human lives that flows through the doors of emergency rooms and psych wards. That doesn't make you qualified to tell us what to do. You know, that's a big fallacy that happens a lot of the times in AA. I'll see people say, I've seen so many people die. I've seen people commit suicide. Well, just because you've seen people die, and just because you've seen people commit suicide, doesn't make you rational, it doesn't make you logical, and it doesn't make you more qualified than anybody else. Everyone wants a quick fix. No, everyone doesn't want a quick fix. Most people who are hooked through the bag on their addictions know that they need to do something about it. The problem is people like you push this method of recovery on them that fails them tremendously. There is more than one way to get sober, but in order to live happily, regardless of what method a person chooses, we can't escape the hard emotional work that needs to be done. There's a vast difference between being sober and being dry. That's more AA bullshit. More AA bullshit. Let me ask you this. If AA works so well and it provides all these spiritual experiences, why is it plagued with all these problems that you like to sweep under the rug and claim they don't exist? You know, or you want to minimize them. You know, well, yeah, people get molested. There's predators in AA, but, you know, it happens. But I think this is just interesting. I'm not even going to keep reading. It's just more of the same old crap, and I'm almost at 30 minutes here. Yeah, I'm at 30 minutes here. You talk about you're sick of people bashing it, but then you go on to bash everybody who doesn't get sober through AA. You go ahead to threaten everyone, to tell them they can never live happy, sober lives unless they do the work. Which, you know, and then you go on to, you make this assertion that everybody who doesn't want to do AA just wants a quick fix without any work. And then you go on to say there's many ways to get sober, but you also say that you can't get sober without taking a step one. I mean, you kind of have just proven to me why people do bash AA. I mean, is AA, you know, you've proven that AA is very intolerant. You've proven that AA doesn't give a shit about victims because, after all, there's victims everywhere. Who gives a fuck if there's a few more? And you've proven to me that you will do anything and say anything to defend your sacred cult. So, I mean, keep writing articles like this, because the more you write articles like this, the more people out here like me are going to read those articles, and they're going to realize, you know, I can't believe I stayed in AA as long as I did. Anyway, I talked way too long on this one. But anyway, now that my camera's updated and fixed, and now that Windows 10 is working on this computer, you're going to probably see more of me. So, until next time.